Episode 1 The Story Before the Story. Cycle 99 is a swashbuckling adventure story about extinction, magic, and hope where you design the characters. Chapters release every Tuesday. Visit patreon.com/Pitchpine Productions for free to vote on chapter and character polls. This story is family-friendly, but may contain occasional strong language and mild violence. Welcome aboard the airship Bannockburn. Thatch Argyll's adventure began when their bedroom exploded. Or at least, that's what the local newspapers reported when the fire had been doused and neither hide nor hair of Thatch was recovered in the smoking remains. This is not my story to tell. It's Benoit's. I was chosen to recount the 99th of our tales, and Thatch was a hero of the 98th, the story before the story. But we have time. You're still calibrating our 4 lenses. Wait, do you not even know about your own lenses? Sheesh. Benoit did warn me, but I didn't believe him. You chose me to be your lighthouse keeper this time around. The beam of the lighthouse is focused by 4 lenses, which, so I'm told, are used to select the heroes for your stories and zap them over to us. Beam me up, Scotty, and all that. There's the golden lens of fortitude, the rose lens of clarity, the emerald lens of attachment, and the purple lens of nightmares. I don't much like looking through that last one. You calibrate all 4, and once they're set, I can use them to bring each hero to your island. The lenses are still calibrating to identify our first hero, so I figured I'd peruse the Lighthouse Library in the meantime. While we wait, how about a peek into our previous tale? Maybe it'll jog your memory. I'm sure I won't read it as well as Benoit, but I'll do my best. Thatch Argyll's adventure began when their bedroom exploded. Or at least, that's what the local newspapers reported when the fire had been doused and neither hide nor hair of Thatch was recovered in the smoking remains. The upstairs bedroom of the shared university housing was toast, one might say, absolutely sizzled. Following the event, 1 or 2 unsavory conspiracy theory bloggers posted conflicting accounts. The university held a memorial service that was decently well attended, if only for the mediocre hors d'oeuvres, and the local news got several weeks' mileage out of it. But nobody truly mourned Thatch. Who could have? Everybody that might have shed a tear for the young inventor had absconded from this mortal coil long before it was Thatch's unexpected time. Still, there were those in the world who understood what had actually happened. Some simply felt it in their bones, attuned to this sort of disturbance. At the moment of the explosion, a psychic, employed by the matriarch of the Worthsums, a family of wannabe American aristocrats, gasped, far away from Thatch's Manchester student flat. In the sterile, pristine living room of a Silicon Valley penthouse, Mystic Tallulah's jeweled bangles twittered around her wrists like a flock of clockwork birds as her hands fluttered to her turbaned head. "A new cycle has begun," she hissed, leaning into the act to ensure that her most generous client stayed that way. Mrs. Worthsome was so shocked she dropped her glass of organic Napa Valley wine. What a loss. In the children's room next door, Horace Jr. began to cry, waking Lottie from her nap. Still further afield, in a sweaty Atlantic City boat repair shop, a grease-coated ex-pilot felt the disturbance, too, as a clenching desire in their heart. They swiped graying hair from their forehead and crawled out of the engine compartment of a red and yellow tugboat. Marielle de Vovk needed to see the sky. Others were attuned to events of this nature in less instinctual ways. The day the first local news story about the explosion broke, an email notification arrived in the inbox of Bertold Spitz. That night, he sat on the edge of his young daughter's bed and presented her with her first throwing knife. 8 days later, Lena Spitz found her uncle standing solemnly at the window of their Hamburg apartment. "Wo ist Papa?" she asked. "Where is Dad?" But her uncle just shook his head, clasped hands, clenching in anger, and Lena knew in that moment that her bedtime stories were true. Earth is a strange and wondrous place, yet most humans are blinded by false prophets and pragmatic oligarchs. Thatch knew, though, that there were questions to be answered. As they awakened in a pungent, unfamiliar field, still smoking from the explosion that put them there, Thatch groaned in pain and lifted shaking fingers towards their face, gingerly pulling their infernal, accursed pocket watch from where the glass casing had shattered against their right eye. Even still, one eye was certainly enough to wonder at what they saw around them. A new world. The pain was the first problem. Inventors have a fencer's constitution, and as such, Thatch was no stranger to pain. Their hands and forearms were littered with errant cuts, bruises, and burns from years of tinkering, sawing, soldering, wiring, experimenting. But their minds screamed at them to get it out, get it out, get it out. Thatch's hands jumped of their own accord towards their eye, every instinct telling them to blink and rub at it. But another logical part of them knew not to do that. Instead, Thatch ran their fingers over the face of the pocket watch, feeling how it had shattered. The surface seemed relatively complete, albeit cracked, with only one large shard of glass jutting outwards, likely the culprit that had done in their cornea. They couldn't tell whether smaller shards remained embedded in their eye. Remembering the eye wash stations from their first-year chemistry classes, Thatch got on their hands and knees and listened. With whatever luck was left to them, a stream burbled nearby. Thatch crawled towards it until the vegetation beneath their fingers gave way to mud, and then smooth river stones with cool water flowing across them. Thatch rallied their good eye and examined the water, crystal clear, running smoothly. Calculations, intermingling with the pain, smudged across the quintessential dark under eyes of an overworked university student. If this was what they thought it was, what we know it is, then there could be all manner of unknown microbes, chemicals, new elements, or even new forms of energy, perhaps magic. Thatch shook themselves and plunged their hands into the water. They needed to flush any remaining glass from their eye. But the cold, clear water hit their damaged pupil like a lightning strike, and Thatch fell instantly unconscious. When Thatch awoke once more, their eye no longer sizzled like an omelet. But as they blinked rapidly, they realized something else. Though there was no more pain, there was no more sight out of that eye either. They lay in the mud beside the creek, gazing up at the sunny sky through their left eye, and tried to process what had happened to them. Some flecks of light danced across the murky darkness of their right eye. Clouds scudded across the blue sky through their left. Without the pain to distract them, they could examine where they'd ended up. Thatch pulled himself up and looked around. They'd landed, if that is indeed what had happened, in the middle of a green, grassy field. It could almost be the English countryside, if not for the foreboding and distinctly non-English jungle looming beyond the stream. Dark trees with thick brown bark clustered together, vines crisscrossing between them, and strange flowers turning the jungle floor into a riot of color. The biology A-level in Thatch urged them to examine the novel plant life, perhaps to do a quick sketch in a notebook. Their notebook! Thatch scrambled to their feet, a little wobbly, but otherwise intact. They patted themselves down, running their hands along their blue corduroy vest and tattered jeans, counting each of their fingers and wriggling their toes inside their ragged white sneakers. Their clothes were a little singed, pitted here and there with smoking holes, as though Thatch had been sitting a bit too close to a campfire, rather than plummeting across space to what they suspected was a fabled lost island. If that is indeed what happened. "Gives them character," Thatch murmured to themselves, shrugging off the damage to their clothing. It's nothing a little darning couldn't fix, and Thatch had been meaning to get into mending. Thatch's other possessions lay scattered through the grass. As they tore their gaze from the jungle, which, now that no lion, tiger, or bear, oh my, had emerged from its depths, felt more enticing than threatening, and scanned the rest of the horizon. Far in the distance, red mountains jutted into the hazy sky. In the opposite direction, Thatch was still a mite too groggy to properly ascertain cardinal directions. The plains continued on for what looked to be miles. The island smelled of dust and heat, like the crunchy dryness of a wheat field, mixed with something different, something greener, somewhere between mint and cilantro. Forehead creasing, Thatch dropped to one knee and plucked a few blades of grass. They were thicker than the ground cover Thatch was familiar with, and more oily, like fresh rosemary, and their fingers grew sticky as they crushed the little leaves and lifted them up to sniff. Their eyes widened as a pleasant surprise took hold. This was definitely the source of the sweet, herbaceous smell. "Wonder if it's edible," Thatch murmured to himself. "Feels like it would make an excellent ice cream." There was a floating, delighted feeling rising in Thatch, lifting them lightly to their feet and putting a spring in their step. Thatch was not someone who felt attachment to the life they'd had before, not since they'd acquired the pocket watch. Ever since that pocket watch had come into their possession, it carried a history of doom and death in its wake. They knew it had to be cursed. Nonetheless, Thatch had to know, had to figure out how to get it working. Night and day, every moment between the bare minimum of coursework required to pass their degree, the pocket watch had occupied their thoughts. For Priya, Thatch had always told themselves, but deep down, they knew it wasn't just about Priya. In their heart of hearts, they were selfish, and their curiosity about the pocket watch was born from a need to be the one who would get it working. Why? Thatch had always wondered. Why do I have to be the one? Now it was more imperative than ever. Somehow, in all of Thatch's tinkering to try and get the pocket watch to work, it had brought them here, to a new world. Which begged the question, what else could the watch do? Thatch hardly dared think it, but think it they did. If it can transport you to new worlds, Thatch wondered, could it bring her back? The lightness did not abate, and Thatch began to fancy themselves a bit of a Bilbo Baggins. Excited, albeit somewhat baffled as to how and why their life had unfolded the way it did. The objects that had come through, as Thatch took to thinking about it, alongside them were an odd subset of the things they'd had in their flat. Their notebook, thankfully, which contained all their prior experiments into the pocket watch. Their tool belt, most fortunately, complete with many of their favorite tools. Their old A-Levels biology textbook came through, although Chapter 9 had somehow been singed beyond repair, and what was likely a small packet of sour peach rings had melted into a plasticky lump. A real shame, as food and water were two of Thatch's major concerns. Water, at least temporarily, was less of a problem. During last Christmas's Pass the Parcel, Thatch had wound up with a small survival tin, complete with a tiny vial of iodine, various over-the-counter medications, antiseptic wipes, bandages, and a sterile suture kit. Venturing just a few steps into the jungle, they dared go no further, although they could feel it calling to them, Thatch found a plant with thick green blades for leaves easily woven together into baskets. They fashioned a container for water, added a few drops of iodine, and let that purify, and then got to work constructing a kind of tarp out of the leaves, sewing them together with thin stripes of the tree's bark, a texture not unlike that of a palm tree. Food was the next problem. Thatch didn't like their chances at playing Russian roulette with the mysterious berries they encountered in the jungle, and so decided to get the lay of the land first. The rest of that day, as clouds began to roll in and cover the sky, Thatch walked. They skirted the edge of the jungle, the mountains behind them, following the stream as it grew and eventually coalesced into a rushing river. That night, they sheltered beneath their makeshift tarp and tinkered with their pocket watch until sleep overcame them. They tried to get a peek at the stars, but the clouds hung heavy, obscuring any familiar constellations. The following morning, however, as Thatch, stomach growling, picked their way across the plains and contemplated taking a risk on the riverside berries, they smelled something. They stopped in their tracks and stuck their nose in the air, completely nonplussed. Pie? Thatch was in need of some inspiration. What did you do? Cycle 99 is written, created, and produced by Hannah Semmelhack. The theme song is The Boy and the Kite by Solitude. To vote on end-of-chapter and character creation polls for free, visit patreon.com/pitchpine productions. Thatch Argyle was designed by Aaron Myatt, and their fears, dreams, history, and appearance were voted on by the patrons. If you'd like to choose bonus characters, consider joining one of our paid Patreon tiers for as little as $1 per month. Thank you to my lovely beta readers, Fiona, Aaron, and Paige, and to Basil, official lore keeper. Special thanks to Mothfella, CK, and Rainstorm. And thank you for reading, listening, and voting. May fate's four winds carry you back to our skies again soon.